Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone, and welcome to Cultivating Wholeness in Ourselves and Our Fractured World, a special conversation between Richard Brady and Kaira Jewel Lingo. I am Elizabeth McKellar, the Director of Sales, Marketing, and New Media at Parallax Press, and it is an honor to be your host for this eventful and meaningful event. Today, we'll spend the next hour exploring the profound ways mindfulness and compassion can help us navigate the challenges of our times and reconnect with our shared humanity. Following the discussion, we'll have a 30-minute Q&A session, so please feel free to submit your questions using the Q&A feature throughout the webinar. If we do have some time after the questions in the Q&A that are written in the Q&A feature have been asked, and you would like to ask those questions personally, we would be happy to have you there. But we will put priority towards those questions asked in the Q&A feature. I'm delighted to introduce Richard Brady. Richard is a trailblazing educator, author, and mindfulness practitioner who has dedicated decades of his life to bringing mindfulness into education. As a founding member of the Mindfulness in Education Network, Richard has taught mindfulness to both students and teachers for over 20 years, transforming classrooms into spaces of greater awareness, compassion, and presence. Richard is also a lay Dharma teacher in the Plum Village tradition, having received transmission of the lamp from Thich Nhat Hanh. In addition to his foundational work in education, Richard has just released his latest book, Short Journey Home, a deeply personal account of his mindfulness journey. Joining Richard in this conversation is the illuminating Kaira Jewel Lingo, who brings a wealth of experience as a Buddhist meditation and mindfulness teacher. Kaira Jewel practiced as an ordained nun in Thich Nhat Hanh's Order of Inner Being for 15 years before continuing her teaching journey as a lay Dharma teacher. Her work spans diverse communities, from activists and educators to families and youth, and she has been instrumental in cultivating mindfulness in education through projects like Wake Up Schools. Her books, Healing Our Way Home and We Were Made for These Times, provide practical and spiritual guidance for navigating life's uncertainties. As a special thank you to everyone joining us today, we are offering 20% off discount code using Cultivate20, which I'll of course share in an email after this, which can be used to purchase Short Journey Home, Healing Our Way Home, and We Were Made for These Times. This code will be valid until December 31st, so please don't miss out on the chance for these transformational books. For offering Donna to Kaira Jewel and Richard, I'll drop that information into the chat. So I'm just going to go ahead and let's begin. Please join me in welcoming Richard Brady and Kaira Jewel Lingo to the conversation.
Would you like to start and say a little bit about your two books?
Yes. Thank you, Richard. Thank you so much, Liz, for your very warm welcome, and to everyone at Parallax. And just a deeply warm welcome to everyone here. It's so lovely to see new and familiar faces, dear old friends. We both were going to just start off by speaking to how our books connect to this theme. Cultivating wholeness in ourselves and our fractured world. And what I would share first about the book We Were Made for These Times. Actually, I'm realizing I need to take a breath with you all before I jump right in. We have so much we wanted to share, and we didn't really plan for a meditation or anything, but at least we could take a few breaths together with the sound of the bell. Yes. So let's all feel our bodies and feel whatever is on our hearts as we arrive here together, whatever is in our bodies. And as we listen to the sound of the bell, giving space, giving acceptance to whatever is here as much as we can. It's so wonderful to have the time and space to breathe and know that we're breathing. To feel the body and know that we are alive in this precious one life. So, what I wanted to begin with is the importance of being with things as they are in order to cultivate wholeness in the midst of fractured and breaking down, unraveling structures and systems that we need to see what's happening clearly and accept it before we can be resourced enough to shift or bring something that can lead to wholeness, right? And that if we deny the painful realities of our world or of our own wounds or in our own psyches, if we try to move away from that, suppress that, then there's no hope for wholeness. There's no ability to move towards wholeness. So it really, I think, one of the chapters in my book is we were made for these times is accepting what is. And I just wanted to read the one of the opening quotes in the book. It's a Tibetan Buddhist prayer. Grant that I may be given appropriate difficulties and sufferings on this journey, so that my heart may be truly awakened and my practice of liberation and universal compassion may be truly fulfilled. So this profound willingness to meet the world as it is, to meet whatever is arising on its own terms, not on our terms, but to really work with it so that it can form us in the alchemical fires of spiritual transformation, and so that we can have the chance to really grow spiritually by not trying to avoid what needs to be faced, what needs to be known. So I'll just begin there and invite you, Richard, to also share what more about your book would you like to share on how it's connected to this theme.
Thank you, sister.
Mm.
I'd like to begin by sharing a poem that I wrote on my way home from visiting our dear friend Susan Hadler from the Washington mindfulness community. She had contracted encephalitis of the brain and was almost completely paralyzed when I visited her for 3 days. On the flight home, I was feeling completely overwhelmed, and I felt like I needed to unload some of the things I was carrying, but I had no words that I could write in my journal. And then suddenly a poem came out, and it's called My Teacher, My Teacher. Life enters the hall, and I rise. She walks slowly to the altar, turns and bows. I bow to life. The lesson is complete. After I wrote that poem, I thought, Thich Nhat Hanh is my teacher. Why am I saying life is my teacher? And then I realized that now that wasn't quite right. Life is my teacher. And Thai, Thich Nhat Hanh's nickname for teacher, or the Vietnamese nickname, is the person who has most prepared me to receive the lessons that life has brought me and continues to bring me. So that was a very important understanding about his role in my life and life's ultimate role and where the teachings, the opportunities for learning come from. There are many examples in my book of life coming to me in my father's Alzheimer's, in depression, in my own depression, and on, and always the presence of teachings from Thai and other wonderful human beings have helped me to navigate the lessons that life had in store for me. I'd like to, yeah.
I'm so sorry. Could you speak a little higher? Sorry, there's just some issues with hearing, if you don't mind.
Okay, sure, I'll try.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Liz. So I'd like to just end with another poem that really is about what Kaira Jewel was just talking about. When I was invited to become a Dharma teacher by Thai, one of the things I needed to do was to write an insight poem to offer to Thai and the ancestors in Plum Village when I came to Plum Village. And that was somewhat daunting for me. I was a math teacher, not a poet. But I decided that the poem would be about freedom, because that was something that I'd thought about ever since I was a teenager. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about freedom and talking to people about freedom. And got nowhere, I thought. Finally, I went to my wonderful therapist, who was also a practitioner in Plum Village tradition, and asked him for help. And what he did was he gave me an assignment. He wrote on the top of a piece of paper, freedom from, and then halfway down, freedom to. And he said, next week, come back with your answers. So when I got home, I did my assignment right away. I was a school teacher, so I knew that was the best way to do it. Don't put it off. And I put down 2 things for freedom from and 2 for freedom to. And they were things that I knew quite well and didn't learn anything from writing down. I brought them back and said, well, here's my assignment, but I don't know where it's going to take me. And well, it took me somewhere, because about 5 days later, I woke up in the morning, and all of a sudden I realized that there was a third kind of freedom. And I wrote, and the poem came out, just like the first one that I shared with you. And the poem is called This Freedom. This freedom, not freedom from childhood habits, from childhood fears, not freedom to open to the love surrounding me, embracing me, to know and live my truth. This freedom with habits, with fears, with heart protected, truth hidden deep inside. This freedom with this moment, just as it is. Thank you, Kaira Jewel. I'll pass back to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Richard. Liz, I wonder if you could make me and Richard co-host because I can't unmute when I go on mute. Thank you. Such beautiful poems, Richard. Thank you. Um, hmm. I think what you've just said, both about Ty's impact on you and how he's the person that's helped you to really learn from life the most. I would really echo that. And also what you just said about freedom with all of who you are. Really, I feel like that is the biggest gift for me on this path of practice. Also, is really learning to accept and love myself as I am, and I'm still very much on that journey. And that was really one of the gifts for me in this rather arduous process of finding my way from life in the monastery to life outside of the monastery, and which you were a very dear friend to me, during that time, as quite a number of you here on this call. You were also really dear friends to me at a very fragile time in my life. But what really was powerful for me was going on silent retreats in that time when I just felt I didn't know if I was going to break, like I was having to stretch so much in these questions of who am I and what am I to become, and will I go back to the monastery or will I not? Because I was in robes for about 2 years after I left the Plum Village community, and there was so much that was unknown, and it was such a destabilizing time where I didn't know myself. I didn't know who I was, and I wasn't used to that. And what was so profound about sitting in silence was um, getting so close to myself, because it was just day in and day out. It was just me in there. There was nobody else to distract me, or that I needed to worry about. Or I mean, I was practicing with 100 other people in silence, but I really was learning to get close to myself. And while no answers to my most burning question about, will I disrobe or will I go back to the monastery, those answers didn't come to me on those long silent retreats. What did happen for me was being able to accept where I was, being free with all of my fears and my worries and my anxieties and my unknowns. And I just, I think this was really the gift of being a nun in the monastery was, and having a teacher who loved us uh, quite unconditionally. That was my experience. Was, learning through this practice of just coming back to ourselves over and over, slowing down, was learning to get to know myself and to have the Sangha shape me and nourish me and teach me and grow me as a spiritual practitioner, so that I could come to know myself and appreciate, my strengths, but also see and work with my weaknesses, my shortcomings. And then to be on this path in a silent setting where I could just be so close to myself, to all of the, I mean, there was this the ability to track in such great detail when suffering would arise, and to really be with it as it would arise, to understand it, to integrate its wisdom, and then to see when insights would arise, when joy, when forgiveness, when letting go, all those things I could kind of slow things down enough to begin to do some um, um, real healing that just allowed me to trust the moment of the breaking down, of the falling apart of my life, and know that I could dwell there and not have to escape, the utter rawness, the utter, like, it was like being, operated on, like being so exposed that I could hang out there. And what I was able to touch through, life as a monastic, but then also this very turbulent time of discerning where my life was going to go, trust that I could trust life, as you just said in your beautiful poem, that life would take me where I needed to go. And I didn't have to have all the answers. I didn't have to know um, all the steps, I just needed to know where I was right in this moment. And that was enough, because this moment would lead inevitably to the next moment. And if I could be in that moment, then I could be in the next moment, just exactly what Thai always taught. So, so that's a lot of the, those really difficult experiences were a lot of what um, I called upon in writing this book. We were made for these times. Um, was just what life was teaching me in how to go through moments of loss, of disruption, of change. It's like, if we can just be in the moment, we can life will show us what to do and how to go. So yeah, thank you for that poem, Richard.
Thank you for this very personal and life-changing time sharing with all of us. I'd like to continue and say something about Sangha, that Kaira Jewel was talking about, the support of the Sangha, the spiritual community, but a very different kind of Sangha. So this is an event that happened in the early summer of 2022. It happened at Morning Sun Community, which is a mindfulness community in New Hampshire, not far from where we live. And I was one of the 3 leaders of a retreat for educators, which became an annual retreat. This was the second one, and it immediately followed COVID. So the teachers who came to this retreat had just experienced a very, very difficult time in their schools coming out of COVID. And then very shortly before the retreat, there was the killing of 19 young people and 3 teachers in Uvalde, Texas. And when the teachers arrived at Morning Sun, there were probably about 25 teachers who came. It's a small center. They were weary and deeply sad. It was a difficult energy, and we knew that it was up to us to change, to provide some support for them from the very beginning, as soon as they started to arrive. And what happened was that the first night in orientation, one of the things we taught and practiced, was a chant, which is often used at the beginning of Plum Village retreats, a chant to Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva, great being of compassion. And it was totally new to many of the participants, some of whom had never actually meditated before in any setting. But it was received very well, because compassion was something that was so necessary at that time. The next evening, we had a special ceremony. As the lights were out in the small hall, and as each person came in, she or he received a lit candle and some red flower petals representing the blood of the students. And we sat down, and after everybody had taken a seat, the cellist in our organizing team started playing the chant, the music for the chant for Avalokiteshvara, and everyone started chanting quietly. And then one by one, each of us walked slowly in meditation to the altar, put our flower petals in a pile, and put our candle on the altar, and then returned. Eventually, the hall was dark, except for the candles on the altar. And we just sat and felt the community around us, the grief around us. And then we got up and quietly left. The following evening, we had what is called in the Plum Village tradition a be-in. It was with tea. It's also called a tea ceremony with tea and cookies. And then people shared from their heart songs, poetry, stories. And I had been to many be-ins in different retreats. This was over the top. The joy, the sense of wholeness was totally there. And it brought tears to our eyes, just as the night before had, but for a very different reason, because this great sadness had been held by the community, and healing had happened. and it allowed for the release of the other side of suffering, joy. This was an unforgettable retreat for me, and I'm sure for all of the educators who were there. So thank you for now being part of that retreat with me.
Thank you so much, Richard. I feel like I was there the way you described that, and really appreciate just holding that together here. Um, what's coming for me now to share is not from any book, but really just an experience of collective healing that I touched when we were on a trip to Vietnam with Thai, and I want to share about it because it connects to something that I feel is really needed in our very very unhealed country of the United States and our world, really. But so many of you here may have been on this particular trip to Vietnam, which had 3 grand requiem masses for healing in Hanoi, in Hue, and in Ho Chi Minh City. So the 3 north, center, and south, 3 main cities of Vietnam. And I think this particular event happened in Hue, but so each of these grand requiem masses were 3 days long, and the reason for them was because Thai recognized that there hadn't really been there hadn't been a collective healing of the Vietnam War, of all the people who lost their loved ones in that war, that once, the war ended, a lot of, the grief was suppressed. And I was just reading this morning, one of the founders of Black Lives Matter said, we're asked to heal individually something that was a collective wound. Right? We cannot heal a collective wound individually. And so Thai was really wanting to bring healing to the land, right? As Senator Raphael Warnock says, we need to bring healing to the land. So, so these 3 ceremonies were organized, and it was the first time that people had a chance to name who they lost in the war, their names, what the date was that, that they might know or not know, but they could guess, and then the location and all the people's names. So 10,000 people participated in each of these 3 ceremonies. So 10,000 in the south, 10,000 in the center, 10,000 in the north, and we temple was hosting it, and there were many altars and just reams of sheets of paper stapled to the altars with thousands and thousands of names. So they were made public, right? And offerings were put on the altar. And then there was chanting. There was a tantric master who held the ceremonies alongside Thai. They were both the masters of the ceremony, and there were monks from Vietnam, and then our monastics. We were chanting through the night and praying and really calling all of these spirits, the departed, to come and be honored, acknowledged, released. so that healing could happen, right? Like back to what I shared at the beginning, we cannot heal if we don't look and see what actually has happened, if we try to pass over those wounds. And so some very powerful things happened. I wasn't in all the different ceremonies, but I know one of the things that happened was, so there was preparations, right? Where before the ceremony, they took a long cloth was laid out in the river in Hue because many people were killed there. And so this, cloth was set down in the river, and then there was a ceremony calling upon those who had, died to come to the ceremony in the temple. And what I was told by people who were there was it took 10 men to pull that piece of cloth out of the river. It was so heavy. And different things like this were happening in each of the ceremonies. In each of the ceremonies on the last day, it rained. Right? So everyone who was part of it was encouraged to practice the precepts, the 5 mindfulness trainings during these 3 days, to eat vegetarian at home, to speak lovingly in their families, to not get into arguments and fights, but to really purify themselves so that all of us purifying ourselves would allow the healing to happen for all those who had passed. And so I was part of, we could choose as the Plum Village monastics if we wanted to be in the main hall with the chanting, the monks that were chanting. And there was, the other tantric master was making mudras and was in this deep concentrated state. His monks were leading the chanting. We were allowed to go in if we wanted, but if we went in, we had to sit there without moving for basically 6 or 8 hours, like through the night. So you didn't get up, you couldn't eat, you couldn't drink, you couldn't go to the bathroom. You were just there in this very concentrated time of praying and chanting. So I went in, we didn't even have cushions, I don't think. So it was, not particularly comfortable sitting on a hard floor, cross-legged like that for hours. But I remember I didn't feel any discomfort in my body. I don't know what happened, but I was carried into this state by the intensity of everyone's deep intention for healing. And what I remember encountering in this, I was just meditating, and all of us were just, those of us, we didn't know the chants, we were just sitting quietly meditating and feeling what was happening. And I remember being in touch with all the pain that still needs to be healed in our country, the United States. And I just was feeling like all the witch hunts and all the women who had so much wisdom, and probably men too, who were burned or, killed because of their great wisdom and knowledge. And then I was in touch with the deep suffering of the Middle Passage of, kidnapping and raping and killing Africans to, become the fuel of this infinitely greedy, capitalist white supremacist system in the United States and all throughout the Americas that hasn't been grieved. And then I was seeing the Trail of Tears and the indigenous Holocaust of all these indigenous people wiped out by disease, by ethnic cleansing, being pushed off their land, many of them multiple times, moving once and then having to move again and again, treaties broken over and over, and languages lost and cultures lost. And it was this profound moment of just all of those. I was calling in all of those spirits because those were the people that I knew were part of my land experience, my culture. And I was inviting them to be healed in this chanting, them to be part of this incredible ceremony. Um, and that's one of the most profound experiences I've had of collective healing. And it was as if we felt there was this collective exhale after each of these three grand requiem masses. Like people in Vietnam felt they were seen, their suffering was seen. It was acknowledged, it was held, it was embraced, it wasn't ignored. And by the way, these were ceremonies for anyone who had died. This was for anyone. You could have been from the north, you could have been from the south, you could have been, didn't have any political or, it was everyone. And I think that's what was so powerful too, was when there's a winning side or a losing side, only one side gets to tell the story, right? But in these ceremonies, everyone's story was held equally, was held lovingly. And I just want to close this part by saying that I think the reason in the United States and probably other countries as well, the reason why we are not facing what's happening with the polycrisis of climate devastation, species extinction, biodiversity and ecological collapse, the melting of the ice caps, which will not come back in many, many generations. The loss of the coral reefs. I mean, the reason we have elected, the person we've elected in this country, the reason these school shootings keep happening that you spoke to so powerfully, Richard, the reason we're allowing a genocide to happen paid by our taxes right under our noses on our social media feeds, day in and day out, we're seeing innocent people being genocided. The reason this keeps happening and the reason it can happen is because unhealed trauma is driving all of that. Because the lies we have been told and we have accepted and we have lived by are not being examined. All of the suffering of Indigenous Holocaust, of slavery, of I think we need things like grand requiem masses in the US where we can collectively mourn the utter horror that birthed this country. And I think until we do that, we're going to continue to see incredible harm being perpetrated all over the world. The US has been a bearer of great harm in many, many places on the earth. And that's not part of our national story. That's not part of what we see ourselves as, but it is absolutely who we are as a country. So, yeah. Thank you.
Breathing out. Yeah, we've been breathing in a lot recently. It's time to breathe out. Thank you. Well, I'd like to tell a story about conflict because conflict is so much in our hearts these days. This is a story from my school. It's Quaker School, Sidwell Friends School in Washington, D.C., where I taught for 34 years. So I taught at Sidwell Friends School, high school, for 34 years. And at one point, I had been on sabbatical and had returned and discovered there was a message from the principal of my school to myself and to my friend Marcia, who was the director of the Quaker side of the school, of the high school Quaker program, informing us that he needed our help with a situation involving two students. One of the students came from an Armenian family, and he had recently been putting flyers up on bulletin boards about the Armenian Genocide Memorial Day that was coming up. And he had written an article for the school paper about it. The other student came from a Turkish family, and she was not involved in political kinds of things. She was a quiet, artistic, introverted young woman. And she was very disturbed to see these flyers up on the bulletin boards talking about the Turkish genocide of the Armenians back in the early part of the 20th century. And she went home and told her parents, and her mother called the school and spoke to the principal and said, there's no reason that these kinds of things should be happening at your school. Those flyers should come down right away, and please do something about it. So what he did was to ask Marcia and me what to do about it. We decided to use something that Quakers call a clearness committee to meet with these two young people. That there would be Marcia and myself, and there would be two classmates of theirs who were also seniors, who they both agreed on. And that committee was constituted, and we met in the school library on a Saturday morning. And to begin with, we set out the guidelines for what would happen very clearly. That the two students were not to speak directly to each other, but were to speak to the committee. And if there was a question that came up, they would answer the committee. They would not. They wouldn't answer each other, so that the energy was not hostile. That was the hope, and we thought maybe in this kind of a setting there would be enough space for them to actually listen to each other and hear each other, and find something that they hadn't found before. Well, the Turkish girl began by talking about how upset she was, and the boy said basically what he said was just a repeat of everything that he had said before and in his article, and about this terrible event that happened, and there hadn't been really apologized for. It was a deep weight that the Armenian people were carrying, and this went back and forth without any change. And then, after about an hour, the girl turned and faced the boy and looked at him and said, "I cannot understand why someone your age could be filled with so much hate." And the boy was shocked. He just sat back in his chair and was speechless. And after a moment or two, he said, I'm not filled with hate. But all of a sudden he realized the impact of what he had been doing on other human beings. And he began to talk from his heart rather than from his habits, and reach out and connect with a classmate who had connected with him very deeply. It was the first connection that happened after that long time of just rehearsing things. And they began to talk about and discover that they actually had quite a bit in common. And that genocide was not something that either of them felt good about, wherever and whenever it happened. And that they were in total agreement that they and schools should oppose genocide. And they also felt that their cultures that they came from should be better known to the students and faculty in the school. And they agreed to have 2 meetings that would be open to the community for a speaker about the Armenian people, and another time a speaker about the Turkish people, to come and talk about their peoples to the community. And this happened. But it did not happen because of what we normally think of as a peace process. It happened because of a deep, energetic connection from the heart of pain from one human being to the other that pierced the stories, that went much deeper than the stories that were there about the genocide that had happened in this case. And I think that's one of the sides of Thich Nhat Hanh that we don't actually see so much about, but sometimes we read about it, because he can be also very, very direct and confronting. I have seen that in him in response to a young Vietnamese man who was participating in a New Year's ceremony where each person received a little fortune, and then Thai would read the fortune and interpret it. And I don't remember what the words were that this young man got, but basically Thai said, "What this is telling you is that you need to listen to your parents a lot better than you've been doing." He knew this young man, and so that he knew what this fortune said for him, and he was very, very direct in terms of speaking the truth. So this is one of the great aspects of the practice is bodhicitta. It's called the mind of love. It's also the mind of enlightenment, and it's the place of our deepest truth in us. And it's often a place that we don't really visit ourselves, or that we don't share, because we're going along with being nice, or being with our peers, or what society is telling us to do and to be. But this is one of the things that Thai is particularly known for, because he was an absolute radical in Vietnam in terms of what he was trying to do in the Buddhist church, and did succeed in many ways. And so his activism is something that is growing in the community and in many areas, whether it's with the sexual orientation, or race and ethnicity, or or climate change, or trauma. People in the community are embracing Thai's message to look deeply, see the truth, and then share that truth widely. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Richard. And I think we had said we might move into time for questions and reflections about now. Is that right? For maybe the next 30 minutes, or until 30 minutes past the hour. Is that right?
Yes, we have about 5 minutes left in the discussion if you would like to use that, or we can jump right into Q&As. Please, everyone, feel free to drop any questions you have in the chat or in the Q&A option with Zoom. But if you or Richard have anything to say in the next 5 minutes, we can use that while giving people the opportunity to begin to ask their questions.
Well, I will say something to conclude, because I think a lot of the people that I see on the screen are people who have a practice and who go on retreats. And like me, you probably have had wonderful experiences on retreats and come home a totally different person. And then a little bit of time passed, and you were back doing the same old things that you'd always been doing. And you wonder, what can I do differently? Well, I had that experience on retreat in Green Mountain Monastery, which existed in Vermont for a short period of time. And I had had a very challenging year at home, at school. And there, the snow was deep, the forest was silent, and it was so healing and refreshing. And I was so grateful to find a peace. It even took me a couple of days to really, really feel at peace. But then I knew I was going back to school. I was going back home. And what could I do? So I made an appointment with Sister Annabelle, who was the abbess, who was a very wise English sister. And she listened to my travails. And she said, so I understand, Richard, that you want to take the Vermont practice home with you to, the Vermont practice home to Maryland. And I said, yes. And she laughed at me, and she said, but Richard, you're in both places, but the causes and conditions in those places are totally different. You can't expect to do the Vermont practice back in Maryland. So I just said, oh, yes, of course. And then she said, but here's the good news. The good news is that the conditions in Maryland are perfect for the practice to be done there. And that has been with me ever since. And it's kind of the same theme of, yes, accept the conditions that you find where you are and work with those conditions. It's not about recreating a different kind of being than the one you already are. It's working with who you are and also with who other people are. And so it's something that I often close a question and answer session with. And if nobody asks that question, how should I take this practice home? I'll just write it down and I'll put it in the bell. And then somebody will take it out. And I said, oh, that's a great question. I think I would like to answer that. Okay. So we're ready for some great questions.
Thank you both so much for sharing such wisdom. We do have some questions already coming in. I'll start with this one of how can I best help climate scientists and atheists Czechs who aren't Buddhist hold their fear and determination that if they yell about dismal facts about our climate crisis loud enough, things would change. Are there any groups listening? Are there any group listening processes or individual ones you can recommend?
Thank you so much, Yindra, for that really, really important question. And I think we've been talking a lot about grief, I notice today. And a practice that I have found really powerful in climate work, those who are, activists or scientists, or is the work that reconnects. There's a practice called the truth mandala, where people have a chance to come into the center and express grief or rage or numbness, despair, anger, sadness. And it's held really consciously and intentionally, where there's a space for just really speaking from the heart and being held. And there's preparation that goes, before it, and it's written up online. And then there's, it's important to integrate it, to rest, to have joy and things after that. But I found that to be very, very powerful and healing for people. And the purpose of it is really to give a voice to those things that are stuck in us, and that they're witnessed and honored, acknowledged by the community, so that those energies can be freed up, so that we can offer our best to this situation, which needs all of us to be offering our best, right? So the purpose is really about turning towards the pain, the frustration, articulating it, and that's healing, to just allow it to be voiced and really held lovingly. So I would recommend that as a practice. One other one that was coming to my mind in this conversation is the earth holders version of the touching the earth, where we touch the earth 4 times to Nomi Green, I believe, wrote this one. Each touching the earth is to humans, and we acknowledge how we are part of creating harm for other humans. And then we touch the earth and we acknowledge the ways we're part of, not just creating harm, but our aspirations for how we want to live in harmony with and supporting the well-being of all, humans. And then we do animals, another touching the earth, and then plants, and then the earth, all, the earth herself. And I've led that, and it's been extremely transformative for people. A lot of tears, a lot of giving rise to bodhicitta, as Richard mentioned earlier. So I don't know, that might be something to check out too, as a way to, we need a way to focus our energy and our attention. So grieving, uh, uh, atoning, and then gathering our aspiration. What do we really want? What do we really want this world to be? And how can we support each other? Getting clear about that and then support each other to act. Yeah, thank you, Yendra. Mm. Thank you for all you're doing there in the Czech Republic.
I'll go to the next question. So important to keep dialogue open. Recommendations to skillfully and in a practical way broach the difficult subjects with folks who only want to ignore or pretend nothing bad actually happened. What I'm specifically thinking about is following a suicide that occurred on our road. I spoke openly about it, believing that is the way to remove the stigma. It didn't go over well. So advice on how to go about speaking of these things with non-practitioners and folks who just want to ignore the bad that might be going on.
This comes up a lot in my when I listen to people talk about their relationship to often to their parent, to a parent. And anytime that they try to change the relationship, it meets with a just shutdown. So one of the things that I like to point out is that if you have a relationship with a neighbor, there are actually the neighbor that is outside of you, and then there's that neighbor inside of you. Because you have inside of you a formation of some number of years of experience of who that person is. And although the actual physical neighbor is not available to listen to you, the neighbor in you is there. And so I would suggest that a lot of work is inner work. And a lot of change can happen in your relationship to that inner neighbor that you have there, or that inner father, or that inner mother. And you will be surprised at the transformation that can happen at the inner level, and that will gradually pave the way for a transformation with the physical version of your neighbor or your relative.
I would just add a brief invitation also. Linda, thank you for the question. We started out talking about accepting what is, to really offer compassion to your neighbors that are not able to open to the pain of this situation, and just to honor that, we're all at different points on our journey. And some of us have so much pain inside, we cannot embrace more pain. We cannot look when others invite us to look. And that's part of that trauma I was speaking to right before. Like, it's so close to the surface in so many of us. And so maybe, just holding them in your kind, loving kindness, friendly thoughts that may they be able to uh, open to this at some point. May healing happen in a way that will allow them, and may allow all of us, right, to be able to be in this place with more ease. But it's very normal that it's nobody wants to talk about these things, right? It's very normal. That's just shows the level of pain in our society. Yeah, thank you.
For the next question, there was a wonder about how you, as our teachers, practice with despair and hopelessness in the context of the climate emergency.
Well, I'll start, and then Richard, please share too. Thank you for this question. Um, you know, I think we really need to give ourselves, I mean, I'm trying to give myself, you asked about me, to give myself the space to be there with my feelings, and to be honest about my feelings. And to also know that they are feelings and that they're impermanent and that they're changing. I know that the morning of November 6th this year, I woke up to the news of who we had elected, and I felt like I had been punched in my stomach. And I was really, I cried. I cried. And I gave myself space to feel what I felt, you know. And I also practiced and was open to guidance from uh, those who have equanimity with these ups and downs, and I was able to see, I wrote an article about it. I can put it in the chat, but I was able to see, I can do a lot of things in this moment. I can I can nourish my fear. I can nourish my worry, my anxiety, and there are many things to be afraid of that are legitimate. I'm not at all saying we shouldn't be afraid, but I was aware that I had choices in that moment, and I decided I'm not here to be a vessel for fear. That is not my role. I can feel all that I feel, but I'm here for some other reasons than that. And the title of this event, wholeness, and um, cultivating wholeness in the midst of this fractured society, fractured world. I'm here about wholeness and healing. And holding my own emotions, which sometimes do include despair and hopelessness, that's part of my wholeness. Holding them, right? Holding them, being with them. But then also remembering my bodhicitta, our collective strength and power, and doing whatever I can do with my two little hands and heart to nourish what can bring wholeness to this situation. And that's always a deep meditation in every moment. But it was really, I was like, when I read the news, and I just somehow righted myself that very day. And I was like, nope, I'm not going down this hole. I'm here to, I mean, for one thing, I really felt this is a big wake-up call. This is a real call to listen more deeply. I think there were a lot of voices that weren't being heard. And that was where the surprise came from, right? So there was this, okay, let me listen more to what hasn't been heard. But in this context of climate emergency, the fact is we don't know what's going to happen. We know we probably don't have a whole lot of time to figure it out. And the time is running out, and there are things that will never come back to where they were, right? Even 30 years ago, that's not coming back. But this future is not written yet, and we're still here, and we still have our hearts, we have our wisdom, we have our practice, we have our ability to take direct action and to not participate in systems that are killing life, that are anti-life. We don't know what's going to happen. So for me, the despair, it's like if we go with that, if we say all is lost, we're abandoning our responsibility, and it's another way to check out, actually, to just say, well, there's nothing we can do. It's just not true. I don't think there are certain things we cannot change, but there are a lot of things we can do, and taking care of ourselves, taking care of each other, grieving, and then getting down to business. What is it that we can do that is bringing wholeness and healing to the land? Let's do that. And who knows, right? Who knows what might come of that? But if we don't do anything, we know what will happen. We know what will come of that. If we do something, we're not guaranteed any, particular safe outcome, but we know what the other choice will take us to. So I think for me, I practice with despair and hopelessness by acknowledging them when they're there, and then and knowing that that's not all that's there. There's a lot more in me. There's a lot more in our collective mind that is, that's where I want to put my attention. Thank you.
I don't know if this will seem particularly different from what you said, Kaira Jewel, but what occurs to me are the 5 remembrances. And these are things that these remembrances. I don't know whether you, but I know Thai says many monastics recite them every day. I am of the nature to grow old. There is no way to escape old age. I am of the nature to get sick. There is no way to escape ill health. I am of the nature to die. There is no way to escape death. All that I hold dear and everyone I love are of a nature to change. There is no way to escape being separated from them. And then number 5, my actions are my only true belongings. There is no way to escape the consequences of my actions. They are the ground on which I stand. So with the first 4, I become progressively more reconciled to things that are basically scary and which will happen sooner or later. And if I understand that they're natural, that is how life is. Everything is impermanent. And actually, this planet is impermanent. And our species is impermanent. We've just never had a sense that we were looking at perhaps the end of a lot of things that we took for granted would be around a lot longer. And if I can accept impermanence as a truth, what I do, my actions, are the one thing that I'm responsible for, and that can change the way the impermanence exerts itself. Because my actions are a change in the way things have been and ripple out to other people and other species. And that is where I can, where my source of hope lies. And it's one of the reasons why I've been a teacher, and why Thai places so much value on his relationship, as his writing and the monastics that he's helped train, and because they're his continuation. And that's what we have to offer. Our actions are our only true belongings. So it's a dual process. It's a process of acceptance of reality, and it's a process of understanding our part of that reality and our freedom in that reality to shape it as we are able. Thank you.
Thank you. Since we did start a little late, I will say that there are 2 more questions and about 10 minutes left in that 30 minutes we set aside. So if it's okay with Kaira Jewel and Richard, I'll just ask those last 2 remaining questions for you. One of them is from Beverly. In our community, either people do not understand or do not want to discuss the Middle East, or people think all Palestinians hate Jews, or people are terribly angry at Israel and the US for the killing that is going on. Richard, your story about the Armenian boy and the Turkish girl moved me to wonder if having a community gathering where people with different outlooks could meet each other and recognize each other's humanity. Do you think this might be too difficult to achieve for those who do not have the depth and wisdom of Thich Nhat Hanh?
Kaira Jewel, can you say anything about the Palestinian and Israeli Jew gatherings in Plum Village? Did you have some connection to those?
I did. I was a nun when our community hosted groups of Israelis and Palestinians in the summer retreat. They would come for 2 weeks, and after the first week was just practicing together with the community, not interacting with each other. The second week would be deep listening, and for one day, one group would just share, the other would listen, and then the next day the other group would share, and then the others would listen, and and that had a very powerful effect because people came, you know, only seeing their experience, and they left seeing, the suffering was there in everyone. And I don't necessarily know, though, that that's something in this moment that is, I think, looking at what is happening now, I think we need to listen to the people who are in that situation to kind of discern together what makes most sense, what is most healing. And just yesterday, I had a chance to listen to a very powerful panel organized by the Sacred Mountain Sangha and the Sacred Justice Coalition, which had Israeli historian Ilan Papai, I think, and um, um, Lubna, I can't remember the name, but a Palestinian reporter, and then a Palestinian activist, peace worker living in West Bank. Anyway, it was a beautiful panel of of someone from Jewish Voice for Peace. Really, really excellent discussion, and that recording will be available in about a week. So I would encourage Beverly, you and everyone here to listen to it because it's just really important, I think, to listen to the people that are um, in this situation most directly. Um, and and I think it's a little bit complicated to, for me, the example that I just mentioned in Plum Village, I think that was appropriate 20 years ago. I don't know that that's necessarily, we're not dealing with two equal sides or two armies. It's one army, you know. Anyway, I know that's getting into complicated territory, but um, um, I think that conversation and listening to people, uh, all of these people also had a connection to Buddhist practice on the panel yesterday. Um, I think it's always possible to have people come together and listen to each other, and I also don't think it's appropriate in a moment like this necessarily to ask people who are. I think we are really looking at an apartheid state, and I don't think it's necessarily appropriate to say one side needs to listen to the suffering of the other side in that way that maybe made sense 20 years ago. Um, I could be wrong, but from what I'm touching and experiencing, um, it's a different situation. I think the world is waking up a little more to how how brutality is being normalized and funded and sanitized, and I think that really needs to be addressed. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just thinking about a time during the war in Vietnam where Thai was in this country giving talks on behalf of the Fellowship of Reconciliation. And one of the audience members said to him, "Why don't you go back? If you're interested in peace, why don't you go back to Vietnam and work for peace there where the war is?" And he said, "Because the roots of that war are here." And I think this is the place where we can work on some of those roots because there are some very significant ones right here at home that involve people who live in this country.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you so much, Richard and Kaira Jewel. We have 3 minutes remaining, and this is the last question. Any words of wisdom to accept that I am doing enough? I'm thinking of the genocide in Gaza. I give what I can. I write letters to my elected officials on a weekly basis. On a personal note, I appreciate hearing about talking from my heart instead of my habits. I needed reminders.
Mm.
Thank you all for your practice.
Mm.
That is the most important gift that you can give to the world and to those around you. Whether or not they're practitioners is not important. It's your actions are your true belongings. And those are what you have to give and leave behind.
Yeah, I would add too that um, if we can come together with others there's that that sense of maybe doubt about it. Are we doing enough, or should I be doing more? I think to me, what is my focus since the election is um, forming a close-knit group of friends that I meet with regularly and that I take action with as well. That's what I want to do. I hope to do. But I don't think it works to take action individually. And so, with a group of people that we can meet with on a regular basis and be emotionally intimate with and really caring of, that we can then take action together, whether we vote as a block, we join an organization that's doing work. There's incredible groups that are doing really important work with Gaza, Jewish Voice for Peace. I'm sure there's other organizations people could put in the chat. That there's the boycott, divestment, sanctions, BDS website I was looking at, and I'm really wanting to follow up with that and see how I can participate more in that. But also, I wanted to share about a group of Braver Angels that I learned about that's doing work around bringing people together across political spectrum to have really deep and meaningful conversations on things that matter to all of us, where we learn how to really talk to each other and listen to each other through all of the differences that we might have. So I'm paying attention to the things they're doing, trying to watch their films, go to their discussions. But I think thinking of acting in community, one of the things about like joining a movement as a group is if whatever happens with that movement, if you feel you're no longer aligned at some point, or if you decide to exit, you have still a group of people that you can take action with, right? So joining a movement as a group, like five or whatever, six people. So that's kind of where I'm wanting to put my energy so that we don't need to push ourselves to do more than we can do. That's not helpful. But if we do have others who care like we care, we can do things together, and that looks in all different ways, right? Like the movements need all of us. They need the healers, the musicians, the poets, uh, um, the educators, um, the clowns, right? Those who can bring humor and lightness and play, and they need the people who are willing to go get arrested and go to jail. So all of us, are, march on the street, whatever it is. I think um, getting together with a small group of people that we meet with regularly and take actions with, in whatever way that looks like for your group. Um, that's what makes sense to me.
Thank you both so much for sharing. I really appreciate it. Um, that's going to be all for the questions. I'm sorry if we weren't able to get to everyone's, but I really appreciate everyone. Thank you all again for joining today and for your thoughtful questions and presence throughout our time together. It's been a gift to share the space with all of you, and I'd like to offer special thanks to Kaira Jewel Lingo and Richard Brady for their generous teachings, their insights, and their time. Your wisdom and compassion is so deeply appreciated. As we bring the session to a close, I'd like to express my gratitude again for the shared community and the time we've spent cultivating mindfulness. For all, a recording of this webinar will be shared with you soon. And just may the practices and insights from today nourish you and ripple out into your daily lives. I want to thank you all again, and please be well.
Thank you so much, Liz. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. And
Thank,
Richard, thank
thank
you.
you. Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Kaira Jewel.
Deep gratitude. Have a happy, wonderful rest of your Sunday or Monday, depending on where you are in the world, and to be well.